Claressa Shields just announced a pregnancy that was supposed to be the happiest moment of her entire life. And within 90 seconds, the whole internet turned it into the most explosive paternity investigation we have witnessed in years. Not because of anything Claressa said, not because of anything Papoose said, but because somebody else opened her mouth for exactly 4 seconds, planted 4 words into the atmosphere, and watched the entire world catch fire. 4 words. That is all it took. And those 4 words accomplished something that months of allegations, legal threats, and public denials could never do. They dragged a timeline that Claressa Shields had tried to bury with lawyers, with threats, with public statements, and with sheer force of will, crashing right back to the surface. And this time, nobody is letting it go. The internet has a calculator and it is already doing the math, and the math is not protecting anybody. Because here is the thing that is sitting in the middle of the room right now, and nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, is addressing it directly. The conception window for this pregnancy overlaps with the exact same window that Maserati Bud was describing when he made his allegations about Claressa Shields. The same window, the same holiday, the same living room, the same FaceTime call with Papoose that Bud said he witnessed from inside the house while it was happening. And Claressa called every bit of it fake. She called it lies. She called it fabricated. She threatened to sue. She went public with that threat in front of millions of followers, millions of viewers, millions of people who took her at her word. And then she went quiet. And now there is a pregnancy announcement sitting on the table. And the math is not complicated. You do not need a forensic accountant. You do not need a legal team. You need a calendar. And the calendar is not protecting anybody. It is sitting there with its dates exposed, telling a story that nobody has been able to contradict with facts. So let us rewind, because if you have not been following this saga from the very beginning, you need the full picture before you can even begin to understand why this pregnancy announcement just detonated the way it did. And I mean the full picture, not the highlights, not the cliff notes. You need the real timeline, because the real timeline is where the danger lives. Claressa Shields and Papoose went public with their relationship in late 2024. And when I say public, I do not mean they posted a cute photo on their own terms. I mean they went public in the messiest, most chaotic way imaginable, because Papoose was still married to Remy Ma at the time. Still married. Legally, formally, on paper, still a married man. And Remy Ma was the one who exposed the entire situation. She put their business online. She leaked text messages. She let the entire internet know that her husband, the man she had been with for roughly 2 decades, the man she shared children with, had moved on with the undisputed, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, multi-division world champion boxer Claressa Shields. And from that moment forward, this triangle became the most talked about relationship situation in all of hip-hop and sports culture combined. Every post, every interview, every public appearance became fuel for a fire that has not stopped burning since. Claressa Shields is the self-proclaimed GWAT, the greatest woman of all time, and her resume backs that up. 2 Olympic gold medals, multiple world championships across several weight divisions. She signed an $8 million deal with Win Records in November of 2025, a deal that Papoose, as an executive at that same label, helped facilitate. And that detail matters because it means Papoose is not just her boyfriend. He is her label executive. He is potentially collecting from her boxing revenue and her music revenue. He is financially connected to her in ways that go far beyond a typical romantic relationship. And when you add that to the fact that his divorce from Remy Ma was filed in May of 2025 but still has not been finalized, you start to see a web that is infinitely more complicated than a simple love story. But let us get to the announcement, because this is where everything shifts. This is where the story goes from messy to nuclear. Claressa Shields had been talking about having a baby for months before any announcement actually dropped. She said it in interviews. She said it on social media. She talked about wanting to have a child with Papoose, and she was not subtle about it. She was not coy. She said it plainly and repeatedly. She said she wanted to have a baby in 2026, and then she adjusted the timeline, and the internet was already speculating before any announcement came. Content creators were making entire videos questioning whether Claressa Shields was pregnant. And Claressa pushed back. She said women go through changes. She said women have happy weight when they are in happy relationships. She said people need to mind their business. And then the announcement came. And when it came with fanfare that suggested a pure celebration. New life. New chapter. Joy. Nothing but joy. Papoose was in the room when it happened. The host of the interview looked at Claressa and asked her directly, "Does Papoose know he is having a baby?" And Claressa turned to him, and Papoose said one word. "Absolutely." And for about 30 seconds, the internet was genuinely happy. People were congratulating her. People were sending blessings. It was a beautiful moment, and it should have stayed that way if the internet did not have a memory. But the internet never forgets a timeline. And then the conversation shifted. And it shifted fast because people did not just hear the announcement and move on. They immediately pulled up a different timeline in their heads. The Maserati Bud timeline. The one that Claressa Shields had spent months trying to make disappear. The one that she had denied, attacked, threatened legal action over, and then watched quietly fade. And the reason it came roaring back is simple. A pregnancy comes with a conception window, and conception windows are mathematical. They are not subjective. They are a matter of biology and arithmetic. And when the internet pulled out its calculator and started counting backward, the numbers landed in a place nobody wanted. So who is Maserati Bud, and why does his name matter right now more than it has ever mattered at any point in this entire saga? Maserati Bud is an artist affiliated with 50 Cent, and back in early 2026, he made a series of allegations about Claressa Shields that were explosive, specific, detailed, and backed by claims of physical evidence. Not rumors, not hearsay, specific allegations with specific dates and specific claims of documentation. He said that he and Claressa had been involved during the Christmas 2025 holiday. He said he was physically present in her living space during that time. He said that while he was there in that space, Claressa was on FaceTime with Papoose, and he could hear the conversation happening in real time. He said he had ring camera footage from the residence. He said he had videos. He said he had behind-the-scenes receipts. And he was not vague about any of it. He gave a specific location, a specific time frame, and specific details about what he allegedly witnessed. He described the FaceTime call. He described being in the living room while it happened. And he said the evidence existed to back all of it up. Now, let us be absolutely clear. These are allegations. Everything discussed here is based on publicly available information, and Maserati Bud's claims have not been proven in any court of law. They have not been verified by any independent investigation. We are dealing with claims, and claims are claims until evidence elevates them. But here is what makes this fundamentally different from every other allegation thrown around on the internet. Maserati Bud did not just talk. He said he had evidence. He said he had ring camera footage from inside the residence. He said he had video recordings. He said he had documentation that would corroborate every detail. And when someone claims they have ring camera footage, that is categorically different from someone saying they heard a rumor through the grapevine. Ring camera footage means a camera was installed, a camera was running, and a camera captured something. That is someone saying, I was physically present in the space, the recording system was active, and the footage exists. Whether it shows what Bud claims has not been confirmed. But the specific, evidence-referencing nature of the claim made this situation impossible to simply dismiss. And Claressa Shields responded. Claressa Shields responded immediately and with maximum aggression. She denied everything, every allegation, every detail, every claim. She called Maserati Bud a liar. She called the allegations fabricated. She said she would pursue legal action. She said her team was prepared to take this to court. She made the threat publicly in front of her followers, in front of the world, and she made it sound like there was no doubt whatsoever that her legal team was going to descend on Maserati Bud and demolish him. Claressa was forceful. She was confident. And the public believed action was coming, because when someone with an $8 million deal and lawyers on retainer says they are going to sue, you assume they will. And then nothing happened. I need you to sit with that, because this has become the loudest silence in this entire story. Months passed. Claressa Shields has an $8 million deal. She has lawyers. She has resources most people making internet allegations will never have. She went public with a legal threat that implied imminent, devastating action. And not one lawsuit was filed. Not one cease and desist was confirmed as landing. Not one legal proceeding went anywhere in the public record. The threat was loud. The follow-through was silent. And in the legal world, silence is never neutral. Silence is a communication in itself, and the audience is fluent in reading it. When someone with Claressa Shields' resources threatens to sue and then does not, there are only a few explanations and none are comforting. Either the threat was a bluff designed to intimidate the other party into silence, or the calculation changed because filing would open the door to discovery. And discovery is a two-way street. When you file a defamation lawsuit, the other side gets to request evidence. They get to request documents. They get to request recordings. They get to request the very material the plaintiff would prefer never sees a courtroom. If Claressa Shields filed a defamation lawsuit, Bud's legal team would immediately request evidence. The ring camera footage, the videos, the phone records, any documentation Bud claimed to possess, communications, timelines, everything that could corroborate his allegations. And if any of that evidence exists and corroborates even a fraction of what Bud alleged, a lawsuit would not silence him. It would amplify him. It would take allegations floating on social media and place them inside a courtroom where they become permanent public record. A lawsuit does not suppress evidence. It exposes it. And that exposure goes both ways. So the lawsuit never came. And that absence, that empty space where legal action should have been, has become its own form of evidence in the court of public opinion. Because people are not stupid. People understand patterns. People understand that when you threaten to sue and then you do not sue, something prevented you from following through. And when you have the money and the lawyers and the platform and the motivation to back up your threat, the only thing that would prevent you from following through is the knowledge that following through would hurt you more than staying quiet. The public does not need to know exactly what is in the ring camera footage, if it exists, to draw a conclusion from the fact that no lawsuit was ever filed. The public just needs to see the absence of legal action, and from that absence, the public constructs its own narrative. And that narrative is this. If the evidence did not exist, if Bud was lying, if there was nothing to worry about, then the lawsuit would have been filed, Bud would have been exposed, and the story would have been over. But the lawsuit was not filed. And the story is not over. And the public is drawing its own conclusions from that gap. And then Remy Ma entered the frame. Remy Ma did not enter it the way most people do. She did not write a long post. She did not go live. She did not break down timelines. She did not make direct accusations. She did not name Maserati Bud. She did not reference Christmas 2025. She did not do any of the things a typical person does when inserting themselves into a controversy. She just said enough. And that is what you have to understand about how this woman operates, because with Remy Ma, the delivery is the message. The brevity is the strategy. Remy Ma does not waste words. Remy Ma has proven this repeatedly throughout this entire saga. When she said, "Find some stupid to play with and he found you," that was one sentence. One sentence. And the internet is still quoting it months later. That sentence came without explanation, without context, without follow-up. It landed, and it stayed. She does not do volume when precision lands harder. She does not do elaboration when brevity is itself a power move. She is the type of person who understands something that most public figures never figure out, which is that the most powerful thing you can do in a public conflict is not to say everything. It is to say the one thing that makes everyone else fill in the rest for you. And when they fill it in themselves, they believe it more than if you had spelled it out, because they arrived at the conclusion through their own reasoning, and people trust their own reasoning more than they trust anyone else's statements. So when the pregnancy announcement dropped and the internet was already buzzing, and the conception window math was already being done in comment sections, Remy Ma did not need to write a thesis. Remy Ma did not need to connect the dots for anyone. The dots were already connecting themselves. The timeline was public knowledge. The allegations were part of the public record. All Remy Ma needed to do was plant a seed. And she planted it with the precision of someone who has been in this game for decades and knows exactly, down to the syllable, how to weaponize implication without crossing the line into legally actionable accusation. Remy Ma said something. And whatever exactly she said, however she phrased it, The internet heard it as 4 words. Not his baby. That is what people took from it. That is what spread across timelines and comment sections and reaction videos and podcast clips within minutes of it appearing. Not his baby. And those words did not come with evidence. They did not come with a timeline breakdown. They did not come with a reference to Ring camera footage or Christmas 2025 or any specific date or any specific allegation. They came as implication. Pure, distilled, surgical implication. And the reason those words were so devastating is not because Remy Ma provided any proof. She provided nothing. She provided 0 evidence. She provided 0 specifics. She did not need to. The devastation came from the fact that she did not have to say more, because the timeline was already sitting right there in the open, exposed, unaddressed, and everyone who had been following this story already knew it. She just aimed the spotlight. She did not build the target. The target was already built by months of allegations, a legal threat that evaporated into nothing, and a pregnancy announcement that placed the conception window directly inside the period that Maserati Bud had described. All Remy Ma did was point at it. And once Remy Ma pointed, everyone looked. And what made Remy Ma's response a masterclass rather than just another clapback is what happened in the hours that followed. The Maserati Bud conversation had been fading. It was losing steam. But Remy Ma's 4-word implication resurrected the entire conversation permanently. She brought it back to life without attaching her name to a single specific accusation. She did not say Maserati Bud was right. She did not say Claressa Shields cheated. She did not say the baby was not Papoose's. She did not need to because the audience already had all of that information stored in their memory, and all she had to do was activate it. She just said enough that every single person who read her words finished the sentence in their own head. And once a person finishes a sentence in their own head, they believe it more than if someone had told them directly, because they came to the conclusion through their own reasoning. They feel ownership over it. That makes the conclusion stick. That is not a clapback. That is psychological warfare at the highest level. And there is a broader lesson in how Remy Ma operates that applies to this entire situation. Loud women get dismissed. This is a truth that the internet has proven over and over again. People who scream and rant and post paragraph after paragraph get labeled as bitter. They get labeled as obsessed. They get labeled as unable to move on. Their message gets buried under the volume of their delivery. But precise women get believed. Women who say one thing, say it perfectly, say it with economy, and then walk away get taken seriously because the brevity itself signals confidence. It signals that you do not need to convince anyone, because the truth is obvious to anyone who is paying attention. And Remy Ma just proved once again which category she falls into. She is not the loud one. She is the precise one. And the precise one always wins the long game. Remy Ma dropped one implication and made the entire internet a paternity detective. She did not need to say more. Remy Ma never does. And the beauty of it, from a strategic standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a public relations standpoint, is that by not saying more, she made it functionally impossible for anyone to accuse her of making a false accusation. You cannot sue someone for something the audience inferred. You cannot send a cease and desist for a seed that you planted in someone else's imagination. You cannot take legal action against an implication that never named a name, never cited a date, and never referenced a specific piece of evidence. Remy Ma understood this at a level that most people who engage in public disputes never reach, and she weaponized that understanding flawlessly. So let us talk about the timeline, because this is where the story stops being about personalities and starts being about arithmetic. And arithmetic does not care about feelings. Arithmetic does not care about allegiances. Arithmetic does not care about public relations strategies or legal threats or social media followings or $8 million deals. It just sits there and tells the truth. Maserati Bud said he was with Claressa Shields during Christmas 2025. Maserati Bud said he was in the living space while she was on FaceTime with Papoose. He said he had Ring camera footage documenting his presence in that space during that time. He gave a specific time frame. Christmas 2025. That is the allegation. That is the claim. That is the anchor point for everything that follows. Claressa Shields denied it. She denied it aggressively, publicly, and with the threat of legal action. She called it fabricated. She called Maserati Bud a liar. She said her team would take action. And then the legal action never materialized. Not a filing. Not a cease and desist that landed. Not a proceeding that went anywhere. Now a pregnancy is announced. And pregnancies have conception windows. That is not speculation. That is biology. A pregnancy that is announced at a certain point in time has a conception window that can be calculated by counting backward. And if that period overlaps with Christmas 2025, then the conception window for this pregnancy sits directly inside the exact timeline that Maserati Bud described when he made his allegations. Now, let me be very careful and very precise here, because I am not making an accusation. I am not saying the baby is not Papoose's. I am not saying Maserati Bud's allegations are true. I am not saying Claressa Shields did anything wrong. What I am saying is that the overlap exists as a factual matter of calendar arithmetic, and the internet has noticed it, and nobody, not Claressa, not Papoose, not any representative, not any lawyer, not any family member, has addressed that overlap directly. Nobody has stood up and said, here is the timeline, here is the math, it does not match. Nobody has done that. And the absence of that direct address is doing more damage than any accusation could ever do, because when people see a clear, specific, answerable question sitting in the middle of the room and nobody is answering it, they start answering it themselves. And here is what makes this so extraordinarily difficult for Claressa Shields to navigate. If the conception window does not overlap with the Maserati Bud timeline, then resolving this would be the simplest thing in the world. All she would need to do is clarify the timeline. She could say, here is when this happened, here is the math, it does not match what Bud described, and the entire conversation would lose oxygen immediately. The speculation would deflate. The internet would move on. A simple factual clarification would kill this narrative dead. But she has not done that. And the reason that omission is so loud is because when someone has the ability to end a damaging speculation with a simple factual clarification and they choose not to, the public reads that choice. They read it as avoidance. They read it as the clarification not being possible because the clarification would confirm the overlap. And the internet has a calculator, and the internet is already doing the math. People are counting backward from the announcement. They are mapping the conception window using standard biological calculations. They are placing that window next to Maserati Bud's Christmas 2025 claims. And the two timelines are sitting on top of each other, overlapping, occupying the same space on the calendar. And nobody has moved them apart. Nobody has provided an alternative timeline. The timelines sit there, stacked, and the silence is deafening. This is not bad luck. This is not coincidence being weaponized by haters. This is a collision course that was set in motion the moment the allegations were made and the denial was issued without follow-through. Because when you deny something forcefully and then a development occurs that aligns with the thing you denied, the denial does not just weaken, collapses. And it collapses not because of what the other party said. It collapses because of what you did not do afterward. The collapse is self-inflicted. You do not need a forensic accountant for this. You just need a calendar. And the calendar is not lying for anybody. The calendar does not take sides. The calendar does not have an agenda. The calendar just sits there with its dates and its windows and its arithmetic, and it tells a story that words and threats and public statements cannot override. The calendar is the one witness in this case that cannot be cross-examined, because it does not have an opinion. It only has facts. And then there is Papoose, standing in the middle of all of this. Again, this man has managed a 20-year marriage collapse, a separation he hid for years, a side relationship that went fully public in the most explosive way possible, a divorce filing that has somehow not been finalized months after it was submitted, and every piece of drama in between, all while staying relatively composed and controlled. He has managed narratives that would have broken most people, and he has done it with two tools: silence and strategy. When Remy Ma exposed the finances, the tax debts, the IRS situation, he stayed quiet. When Christmas drama erupted and people noticed Claressa was alone at Louis Vuitton while he was allegedly with Remy and his daughter, he stayed quiet. When Maserati Bud made his allegations with claims of ring camera footage, he stayed quiet. When Claressa Shields issued legal threats that went nowhere, he stayed quiet. Papoose has turned silence into an art form, and for most of the saga, it has worked. It has kept him out of the direct line of fire. It has allowed the narrative to focus on the women in the situation while he stays in the background, composed, unbothered, untouched. But a paternity question is different. And this is the part that should concern anyone who is paying attention to where this story is heading. You cannot charm your way out of a DNA test. You cannot manage biology with composure. You cannot file a divorce and then stay quiet when the question being asked is about a child. Silence works when the topic is subjective. Silence works when the topic is about feelings, about relationships, about who owes taxes, about who is using who. All of those things are matters of interpretation that can be navigated with strategic silence because they are debatable. But silence does not work on a birth certificate. Silence does not change a due date. Silence does not move a conception window. Silence does not alter a DNA sequence. And eventually somebody has to sign something. And that signature will say everything. Because when a child is born, there are documents. There are records. There are medical timelines that are established with clinical precision by healthcare professionals who do not care about social media narratives. The due date is calculated. The conception window is estimated. The prenatal records are created. And all of that information becomes part of a record that cannot be managed with silence or strategy or public relations. It is biology. It is paperwork. It is permanent. And it does not care about narrative control. Papoose has managed every narrative in this saga with silence so far, but silence does not work on a DNA test, and composure does not change biology. The question that is sitting on the table right now is not whether Papoose is happy. It is not whether he loves Claressa. It is not whether he is a good partner or a strategic thinker or a composed public figure. The question is whether the child that Claressa Shields is carrying is biologically his. And that question cannot be answered with silence. Can only be answered with evidence. And evidence is the one thing that Papoose has been able to avoid throughout this entire saga. Because up until this moment, everything has been words. Allegations are words. Denials are words. Legal threats are words. Social media posts are words. Implications are words. But a baby is not words. A baby is flesh, blood, DNA, and documentation. And that is a completely different category of problem. That is a problem that silence cannot solve. That is a problem that only biology can resolve, and biology does not negotiate. And here is where it gets even more complicated for Papoose. If he is the father, then proving it should be the easiest, simplest, most straightforward thing in the world. A DNA test, done privately, confirmed publicly, and the entire Maserati Bud conversation collapses permanently. The speculation ends. The timeline math becomes irrelevant. The internet moves on. The 4 words that Remy Ma planted lose their power. Everything resolves. One test. That is all it would take. But if the DNA test is not being done, or if it is being done but the results are not being shared, then the silence that has served Papoose so well throughout this entire saga becomes the loudest possible statement he could make. Because when you have the power to end a damaging, explosive, potentially legacy-destroying speculation with a simple, routine, universally available medical test, and you choose not to, the public reads that choice. And they read it the same way they read Claressa's legal threat that never became a lawsuit. They read it as the answer being one you do not want to give. So here is where we are. And I need to lay this out clearly, piece by piece, because the elements are scattered across months of developments, and the picture only emerges when you place them side by side. Piece 1. Claressa Shields announced a pregnancy. It was supposed to be a celebration. It became an investigation within 90 seconds. Piece 2. The internet immediately pulled up the Maserati Bud timeline and placed it next to the conception window of the pregnancy. The overlap was visible. The math was simple. The question was obvious. Piece 3. Remy Ma dropped a precision implication that made the entire internet a paternity detective without saying anything that could be legally challenged. She operated in the space between statement and inference, and she turned that space into a weapon. Piece 4. The legal threat against Maserati Bud went nowhere. No lawsuit, no cease and desist that landed. No legal proceeding that went anywhere. and that absence has become its own form of testimony. Piece 5. The conception window for the pregnancy overlaps with the exact timeline that Claressa called fabricated. And nobody has provided an alternative timeline. Nobody has clarified the dates. The overlap just sits there, unaddressed, doing damage every day. Piece 6. Papoose, the man at the center of all of this, is standing in the middle doing what he has always done, saying absolutely nothing. And for the first time in this entire saga, that strategy is not working, because the question he is facing is not a question that silence can answer. And what makes this story so potent, what makes it impossible for the internet to let go of, is that every single person involved has contributed to the situation through their own actions or inactions. Claressa contributed by making a public legal threat and then not following through. Maserati Bud contributed by making specific allegations with claims of physical evidence. Remy Ma contributed by planting a seed with surgical precision at the exact moment it would do maximum damage. Papoose contributed by maintaining silence in a situation where silence is no longer viable. And the internet contributed by doing what the internet always does. Taking all of these pieces, laying them on a table and doing the math. The internet is not creating this story. The internet is reading this story. The story was created by the people in it. The threat was loud. The follow-through was silent. The implication was precise. The timeline is sitting right there. And the question that nobody is answering directly is the question that everyone is asking. And in the absence of a direct answer, the audience is constructing their own. And once an audience constructs their own answer, it becomes more powerful than any statement anyone could make. Because the audience believes their own conclusion more than they would ever believe someone else's. You cannot unconvince someone of a conclusion they reached on their own. You can only replace it with a fact, and no facts have been provided. So the conclusion stands. And it grows stronger every day that it is not contradicted. This is not a situation that can be managed with public relations. This is not a situation that can be navigated with silence. This is a situation that can only be resolved with facts, with evidence, with documentation, and with the kind of clarity that has been conspicuously absent from every single statement made by every single party involved. And until those facts arrive, the speculation will not stop. It will only intensify, because the calendar is still sitting there. The conception window is still sitting there. The legal threat that never became a lawsuit is still sitting there. And the 4 words that Remy Ma planted are still echoing. They are echoing in every comment section. They are echoing in every reaction video. Not his baby. And the echo will not stop until someone provides a sound that is louder than it. And the only sound louder than an implication is a fact. And no facts have been provided. So I have 2 questions for you before we wrap this up. Because this is not a story that ends with a narrator's conclusion. This is a story that ends with the audience's verdict. And I want to hear yours because the audience is the jury in this case, and the jury is still deliberating, and every new piece of information shifts the deliberation. Question 1. Do you think Remy Ma's response was calculated strategy or genuine reaction? And more importantly, does it even matter which one it was, given what she implied? Because whether she planned it for weeks or typed it in the heat of the moment, the effect was identical. The internet became a paternity detective. The Maserati Bud timeline came roaring back. And she did all of it without making a single accusation that could be legally challenged. So does the intent matter when the impact is the same regardless? Tell me what you think. Question 2. Does the Maserati Bud timeline concern you? Or do you believe 100% that this pregnancy is Papoose's baby? And I want you to think about this carefully before you answer, because this is not about picking sides. This is about looking at the totality of what has happened. The allegations, the denial, the legal threat, the silence that followed, the pregnancy, the timeline overlap, the 4 words, the absence of any direct address of the overlap, the absence of any DNA confirmation. All of it. When you put every single piece together, when you lay them all on the table and look at them as one picture, what does that picture look like to you? Drop your answers below because this conversation is far from over, and I am reading every single comment. If you have been following this saga from the beginning, you already know that this story has more layers than anyone anticipated. and every new development pulls another thread that unravels something else. The pregnancy was supposed to be the final chapter, the happy ending, the moment where everything settled into place. Instead, it became the opening of a new investigation. And the investigation is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Because every day that goes by without a direct answer to the timeline question is another day that the silence grows louder and the speculation grows stronger. So stay with me on this, because the next chapter is coming, and when it arrives, it is going to be even bigger than this one. And if you are new here, welcome to the table. The tea does not get watered down in this space. Everything is based on publicly available information, and the analysis comes from looking at the patterns, the timelines, the silence, and the arithmetic that nobody else is willing to do. So pull up a chair, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you do not miss what comes next, because the calendar is still ticking, the conception window is still sitting there, the legal threat is still unanswered, and eventually biology will answer the question that words have been dancing around for months. And when biology speaks, it does not need a publicist. It does not need a legal team. It does not need composure or strategy or silence. It just gives the answer. And that answer will change everything. I will see you in the next one.